Yes, so we asked all of you to reply to made you survey to you for you to give us some hints about your experience regarding lobbying and advocacy. And the first question was if you had done any advocacy or lobbying activities during your project life. So 80% of you replied that stakeholder engagement, it's the most frequent activity that you do. And then we have about 40% that is replying that is targeting meetings with organizing targeted meetings with EU decision makers. So it's quite a good experience. Then about 30% has already participated in a hearing within a EU institution, and about 30% have already sent follow-up of policy recommendations to politicians. So these are already quite good results that show a good experience in advocacy because we are talking about advocacy in regarding the program and the projects.
Thank you, Paolo. I really am very surprised that not only well, engaging stakeholders through events, which could be one of the first ideas you could have, even when you don't know a lot of lobbying or about lobbying or advocacy, but I can see that many already targeted EU decision makers and participated in hearings from an EU institution. So really, I mean, sometimes we are not aware of the activities of some of the projects that we are having in our program. I'm very surprised. I guess that you knew because you're in the Interreg program, but I'm very surprised.
No, I'm surprised too.
Okay.
So the next slide, which is the word cloud. So the second question was, what is the challenge for your project and for which advocacy could be a tool? So you replied a lot of different things, like, for example, one thing that was curious that you said, it was that the crisis, the COVID crisis, is hindering you of organizing more organic face-to-face meetings, and you have to do it online. And it doesn't help to advocacy purposes. This is something that is interesting. I think our speakers could comment on this. And then most of you said that you wanted to transfer the results from projects to policy recommendations, for example. And you mentioned some of the topics that you are working on. For example, you talked about circular economy, like on sectors like fisheries. And you also talked about governance on maritime surveillance, and you especially mentioned sometimes that it's more difficult to do lobbying or advocacy within national authorities. For example, there is the case of Italy, which is, you say that is very difficult to convey messages to Italian authorities, for example. Then also you mentioned you would like very much to influence regional policies, and most of you mentioned more regional politicians and regional level and local level and national level more than EU level. That's what we could see from this uh, survey. And then there's also some of you mentioned some practices, like you need to identify the right people to help you or to work with to change the policy. And as I said before, just to organize more events with the policymakers. And there's also one curious mention, which is carry out advocacy based on science and facts and not emotional appeals, which is curious because I thought that lobbying is about, there's a lot of subjective and cultural kind of approach that you need to have. Not only, I mean, science, of course, absolutely, you have to prepare your cause and what you're going to pitch, but emotions are really important. I think are really important. But we'll hear what our speakers will say about this.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Paolo. I also did you finish? Yes.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, okay. I'm not surprised to hear that most of the programs are trying to reach regional and national level. In one case is because we are talking about territorial cooperation. So if we want to make a change and to have an impact in the territory that we are developing this project. So this is interesting, but maybe also because they think it's easier than reaching the EU level, which is not always, as the Italian colleagues say, is not always that the case. I mean, sometimes the European institutions are more transparent and are easier to know how to achieve them and how to lobbying or to lobbying them. So this bring us to the first panel. The first panel with advocacy and outreach in the EU and international institutions. And I would like to introduce Sara Schill. She is an Irish national and studied political science and international relations in the Trinity College in Dublin and afterwards at London School of Economics. She has more than 20-year experience at the Secretariat of the European Parliament. She working in services for communication, administration, and research. She was a project manager for the website whateuropedoesforme.eu, which is a very useful website, I have to say. And website received the EU Ombudsman Award for Excellence in Communication in 2019. So congratulations, Sara. And since September 2020, she is head of the newly created Communication and Outreach Unit in the DG for External Policies of the European Parliament. Afterwards, we will have Andrea Rodriguez, who is a communication and public relation expert. She worked in several international organizations and governmental bodies, and currently she works for an Interreg program.
So good morning, everyone, and hello from Brussels. I have to say that by Belgian standards, it's a nice sunny day today, but part of me also wishes I was somewhere a bit more Mediterranean, especially during the lockdown. But okay, I hope you are all fine in your respective cities or countries. And thank you for the invite to be with you today. I'm mainly going to talk about the European Parliament. I guess it's because it's the place I know the best. But I'd like to keep my remarks reasonably brief so that in the questions and answers, we can go in different directions, depending on what you'd like to hear or what you're interested to talk about. One thing that we discussed before the meeting was indeed where communication starts and stops and where classic lobbying starts and stops. And indeed, it's not black and white. It's a spectrum, I would say. But really today, what I'm going to try to focus on most is how you get your message out to that particular audience, in this case, MEPs, but can also be other actors in Brussels. As Mercedes said, I'm actually in a rather new job at the moment, still doing communication, still doing outreach, but mainly focused on the external policies of the EU. So I'm interested in neighbors as well as everything else. But for the last 7 years before that, I was the head of unit in EPRS, which is the research service of the European Parliament. And among other policy areas, I was covering regional policy. So I never became as expert on regional policy as I would have liked, but I started to know it reasonably well, and I was happy enough to have the possibility to share these experiences with other colleagues from the world of regional policy over the last few years. So I'm also interested in what Paolo mentioned there, this question of science and facts versus feelings and emotions. Again, I think there has to be room for both, but one of the reasons that the EP Research Service was established, it's quite a new service, it's 7 years old, and one of the reasons it was established was precisely to give MEPs access to neutral, impartial, scientific information and data on which to make their political decisions. It's not that MEPs or most actors have too little information. On the contrary, probably they often have too much, and we'll come back to that again. So let's have a look at, this is European Parliament In Strasbourg, we haven't been there for some months now, I think not since February this year. A bunch of happy young kids trying to get in and participate in one of the big youth events that we do every 2 years. So I'm just showing you a few pictures to set the scene. That's also Strasbourg. It's the outside of the chamber. And this is the inside. And it's pre-COVID times, and you can see they all look very close together. They're not wearing masks. It's hard to believe that we'll ever get back to that world, but hopefully sooner rather than later. So these are your target audience in a way. These are the members of the European Parliament. Who are they? Well, you know that very well. There's about 700 of them. They come from all the member states. Depending on where they are elected and the different election systems, some of them represent a whole country. So a Finnish member represents Finland. Some of them represent a specific city or region or province. So it's good to do your homework and find out where they are based, where they feel close to, where they have been elected, and where the boundaries of their constituency lie. It differs from member state to member state. So this is us in COVID times, as you can see, since the middle of March, like most of us, we've been in a lockdown. We spent a couple of months trying to find our way, and bit by bit now we are back on track. Most normal business is able to continue remotely. So whether it's committee work or the plenary work or many other types of the activities of MEPs, it is on the go now. It's mainly online, but there is limited physical presence inside the Parliament buildings in Brussels. This is, for example, a committee meeting. So you see there's one person, a chair maybe is there, and maybe one or two members of staff, but everyone else is joining remotely. And of course, that has a bit of an impact on how you do business. It has certain pluses and certain minuses. And I think it's interesting maybe to come back to that as well and to discuss that. And one other thing I want to show you is this, which is the EP calendar. And this is probably a plus of coronavirus. In the old days, MEPs led a relatively regimented lifestyle. They spent every month, they spent 3 weeks in Brussels, more or less from Monday to Thursday. They spent 1 week in Strasbourg, more or less from Monday to Thursday. In Brussels take place the committee meetings and the meetings of their political groups where they figure out their political positions. And in Strasbourg, as I'm sure you know, it's the official seat of the European Parliament. We meet there 12 times a year. That's where the plenary sessions take place. That's where most voting takes place. And that meant that generally MEPs were relatively not so often back home, in fact. Usually it was the weekends. It was maybe Friday to Sunday that they were back in their own country or city or member state. And I think that MEPs are very eager and keen to keep in touch with what happens back home. They are the link, indeed, between what happens on the ground and the Brussels level. But physically, they weren't at home probably as much as they would like to be. And that meant, of course, that in the past, if you were organizing an event and it was held on a Wednesday during a Strasbourg week, you had very little chance that your MEP would ever accept an invitation to go to an event on that day. So you had a situation where MEPs used to squeeze a lot of their constituency work onto a Friday. That's new now. That's changed because of coronavirus. It's absolutely possible that a member could be in Brussels and could also be taking part in a virtual event, which is being run from Madrid or Rome or Barcelona or wherever. So that's, you know, that is a plus and something that I think can be exploited in the future. Because another thing, of course, and you know it as well as I do, is that we've all learned now that you can do a lot online and that you don't have to be physically in the room to get everything done. So this is something I think we should think about and try to exploit. I have put, the calendar is kind of full of colors. It's a little bit complicated to the non-expert, but basically the colors show what what the MEPs are doing. But as I say, for you now, it's a little less relevant because MEPs are more available to do things online. I would simply say that if we go back to normality, if we go back to a more regular routine, it's good to keep an eye on the calendar and know, you know, what MEPs are doing, where are they going. The Strasbourg weeks, which are the red weeks in this calendar, they are usually the busiest time and maybe the toughest time to get an MEP on board for a meeting or an event. Okay, so let's maybe make a few comments here, which I think are in many ways self-explanatory. So apologies if I'm pitching this a little bit too basic, but I think it's always good to remind ourselves of the basics. I mightn't cover everything here, but feel free to come back in the chat or in the questions. When you're reaching out to an MEP, or indeed to, I guess, any representative, be it local, national, or European, it is important to do your research and do the homework for a number of reasons. One is that at a very basic human level, if you connect to people, it's much easier to get your message across. And you have to look for that point of connection. And sometimes the point of connection is territorial or local. It's like we are, you know, we're a project managed from Barcelona and you're an MEP that's elected in Barcelona. Okay, that's already a very good connection. That's already a very good link. But it can also be a question of their political positions. It can be a question of their policy interests. MEPs, they're not specialists in everything. We have 25 committees in the European Parliament, and they cover everything ranging from foreign affairs to transport to energy, human rights, and so on. And a typical MEP is a member of 2 committees. So again, without wishing to prejudge too much, if I'm an MEP and I'm a member of the Transport Committee, chances are I'm more interested in hearing about transport projects than, I don't know, health projects. So everyone's interested in health right now, by the way. But so do your research on the member. Where do they come from? What's their CV? What did they work on before they entered Parliament? Where are they based? What are their interests? And, you know, you have, again, the digital tools available because I think 99% of members are active on social media. You will find them on Twitter. You will find them on Facebook. They have their websites. So it's not rocket science to go out and do this research. And I really, really recommend that you do. I think when you are presenting a project, I see a question coming in, 20 ordinary committees in the Parliament and 5 so-called temporary committees. We have a temporary committee at the moment on cancer, for example, and a few others. But again, we can provide this info at the end. I think when you're reaching out to members with a message, time is important. They are very busy. They are really overloaded. Their diary is full. So there is nothing better than providing very clear, very concise overview of your message. And it's often harder, as you probably know, to say something shorter rather than at great length. But you have to do that preliminary work to really distill, I would say, onto one page. What is your message? What do you want from the MEP? Do you want them to vote in a certain way? Do you want them to attend an event? Do you want them to push something on social media? What do you want from them? You have to be quite upfront about that. It helps, of course, you know, to give background, maybe not 75 pages, but you also have to assume that maybe they're not an expert on every policy area that you know well. And we all know regional policy is complicated. I mean, the governance structures, the legislative framework that underpins it, it's not something that everyone immediately grasps. So especially if the MEP doesn't know so much about the world of regional policy, it's very, you know, explain to them what is Interact, what is Interreg, who does what. Don't take completely for granted that this is known. So my advice certainly would be to put everything that's essential onto one page, to push that to the member, and then to leave with them or leave with their assistant a slightly bigger level of background knowledge or notes. Put yourself in the shoes of the member. You know, what would make something interesting for them? If it is, let's say, a health project, and if you know that they had a health scare themselves in the past, if it's a transport project and you know that this member is a fanatical about cycling, if it's a member that was, I don't know, born in a certain city, really like try to find these points of connection and then explain what it is also that can be done at the European level. Because again, you need to go to them with a concrete request, and the kind of concrete requests that an MEP can help you with, on the one hand, yes, general publicity and communication, but if we get more into the lobbying side, MEPs are voters. That's what they do. They make legislation. That's really their core function. So you need to be able to explain to them, you know, what is the basis? Why is this an issue now? Why are we coming to you with this question? Is it because there's a new regulation coming down the tracks? Is it because there's a vote on this in 2 months' time? So you really need to explain what they can do in their capacity as a member of the European Parliament. I think very interesting also with projects, and I guess, again, this isn't new to you, the human touch or the human dimension. It's one thing to go and say to a member, listen, if you give us more money, we can build a new cycle path. But it's actually very nice if you say, now there's a new cycle path, so little Jose can cycle to school every day and doesn't get killed by a car. And really to kind of try to bring together the global picture. Cycling is good because it cuts emissions and it's good for health, and EU should be pushing these policies. With the very local picture, here's a little boy or girl who's going to school on their cycle path. So really think about that, try to come up with the human examples, the good news stories. These things are very powerful in the communication point of view. I also think, you know, social media content, very important. If you give members things that they can use or reuse on social media, be that a video, be it a data, be it an infographic, you're kind of doing the work for them, but it will help them to do the work for you. So I think that is something very interesting to think about as well. And maybe last but not least, members' assistants are often their kind of gatekeepers. So each member will have a couple of assistants based in Brussels and a couple based back home in their own country. And often you will do a lot of dealing, not so much directly with the MEP, but with their assistants. So it's good to stay polite and focused with them as well, and don't insist that it always has to be the MEP that you talk to. That's not going to work so well. I put at my last point there to be resilient, because of course occasionally you can ask for something and you get a no, or you don't get the answer you want. It's generally not personal in these cases. It's probably because of an overload of work or something like that. So it's not something that should make you feel very discouraged. It's part and parcel, I guess, of the work we are in. I mean, I was looking obviously at MEPs, but I think a lot of these tips would, as I say, translate fairly equally, be that to members of the Committee of the Regions, be it to local or regional politicians as well. I'm not going to talk so long now about the lobbying side, because you have a full session on that after this session. I mean, to be very brief and very general, I'm sure, again, you know, at the very general level, how the policy making procedures work. You have the European Commission, which proposes draft legislation. You have the European Parliament and you have the Council, which together decide and adopt the texts. You have a role for the Committee of the Regions, which delivers opinions on a number of items of legislation. But basically, I mean, I'm not a professional lobbyist, and I certainly wouldn't claim to give advice on this, but I think when you are looking at lobbying in the sense of changing or influencing legislation, there are a few things to say. It's good to be present and active as far upstream as possible. In other words, at the moment when the proposal is being drafted by the Commission, that's already a place where in theory it's good to be involved. The Commission does, I mean, pursue plenty of dialogue with stakeholders, so it's a question of trying to maybe access via those channels. By the time a piece of legislation is under consideration in the European Parliament or in the Council, already then the timetable and the calendar is quite short. So you can step in and try to talk to MEPs about it then, and perhaps with great success, but you are leaving yourself a shorter kind of timetable in which to do that. So as I say, upstream rather than downstream. it's not always easy if you're sitting, you know, doing your project on a kind of, let's say, slightly more isolated level, but you know very well you have actors and you have organizations in Brussels to whom you can, I would say, delegate some of this work, be that CPMR, some of the, you know, any institutional contacts with the Committee of the Regions, different representations of the regions in Brussels. So these are the people that are there day to day, following the agendas day to day. And these are the networks and the channels that I would say you should use rather than trying to kind of do everything yourself at the local level. There is plenty of power in numbers. I know I mentioned intergroups on that slide, and I think that's something that Mercedes wanted me to mention. In terms of how Parliament organizes itself, at the formal level, a lot of the legislation work, the preparation work is done in committees. So these 20 or 25 committees that I mentioned, if it's a new file about regional policy, it will go to the Committee on Regional Development. It will be examined there in that committee and voted there before being brought to the plenary. There's usually one member who's responsible for steering the file through Parliament. That person is called the rapporteur. And if he or she comes from one group, then the other groups will nominate shadow rapporteurs. So these people are obviously powerful and influential on one file or another. Intergroups are more informal. They don't really have any formal role within the system. What they are basically is a gathering of MEPs who have a particular interest in one topic or another. Often something where maybe the powers of the EU are not so strong, but where there's still great interest. And cancer is a good example, because the European Union doesn't have a lot of power over health policy. Mostly health policy is for the member states. But a lot of members, and I guess a lot of people in society in general, are interested in the issue of cancer or have been touched by it. So we have had an intergroup on cancer, and basically this is an informal grouping of members who will get together on an issue and try to do a bit of internal lobbying inside the Parliament on those kind of issues. And we have, I guess, about 24 intergroups in the Parliament. Some of them could be interesting for you in terms of the content that they cover. We have one for demographic challenges, for example. We have one for cultural heritage. We have one for rural, mountainous and remote areas. We have one for urban areas. So there are these intergroups, and if you Google European Parliament intergroups, you will find the full list, and they can be a good network as well to pursue. Look, I don't think I'm going to go into detail on this. You know how it is. We are in COVID times. Things are online. Some of that is bad, and some of that we are not enjoying. The lack of interaction and informal communication isn't making life easier. But as I say, there are some potential pluses. One is that people are more accessible to meet online, because it takes less time out of their schedule to give you half an hour if they can do it sitting at their own desk rather than going to your place. So I think it's important to keep an eye on your online presence, to be there following these members on social media, interacting with them, not only maybe at the moment that you need something specific from them, but interacting in a sense of trying to build up knowledge and a relationship with them. I mean, 2 online campaigns which have been on the go recently on Twitter, and which I found kind of interesting, and they were both in the context of the negotiations on the MFF. One was the hashtag Save EU Culture, which was basically saying we shouldn't cut the budget for culture. Performing artists are suffering a lot now because of COVID. And so this was a constellation of different actors, be it from the theatre world, the opera world, the music world, who were really pushing for funding for culture at this time. And they were everywhere, and I saw them quite a lot. Maybe it's a question of the people I'm looking at on social media. But I thought that was a good kind of bottom-up type of campaign, which caught the attention of many members, and which many members, supported. And the other one, also I think very, very much supported by MEPs and Commissioner, was Rescue Horizon Europe. And again, this was a kind of hashtag which was widely used on Twitter and on social media. pushing for no cuts to our research budget, and again, bringing in many scientists, both very senior Nobel Prize winning scientists down to more junior researchers. And those to me were two kind of good examples of very broad campaigns that really kind of brought in different groups and actors in society. And I think that's also interesting to reflect about. It's one thing if you have an issue, but the more people that you can make that connection with that have a similar issue, I think the greater your chance for success. Maybe this is the last slide, and I'm not going to go into great detail. There are options available, of course, in terms of Brussels and Strasbourg, if and when we get back to normal. Members have a quota to invite visitors to Brussels and Strasbourg. They have a quota, they are allowed to occasionally show events, be it like a photo exhibition or a cultural event inside the premises. And that's something that I think could be explored probably when we get into 2021 and if and when things get a little bit back to normal. But in the meantime, you also have plenty of online events. We've got EuropeCom coming up in December, which I think is also very interesting, and where you really have the communication club all together in one online place. So I think that's something to think about as well. I didn't mention so much about media, but in any moment when you're interacting with MEPs, if you can also guarantee and show them that you have local media on board or national media, that's obviously also a plus. So look, I've probably talked enough. I've covered a lot of ground, maybe not in great detail. I'm happy, Mercedes, to stop there and obviously to come back in more detail on any of those points in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Sara. Very interesting, really speech and presentation. And as you said, I mean, when you learn some techniques on lobbying and advocacy, what they say is 90% doing your homework and doing some research, and 10% doing the actual lobbying, right? So yes, I think one of the first things you said is that we need to do our homework and not give for granted, you know, the kind of information the MEPs know or they don't know. And I think something you said very interesting also, it's that they are not experts. And this is where Interreg projects can play their game, in the sense that, yes, our Interreg projects are experts in coastal management zone and energy efficiency. So they could give really a good inputs to the MEP, and they could find very valuable the knowledge. I think that we had a question before going to Andrea. I would like to ask only one question to Sara, and because, okay, first a question to Sara, then we will go back to Mentimeter, and then Andrea will come. And the same time, please keep on asking questions, because we will come back to you after the Q&A, after Andrea's presentation. But the question I would like to make to Sara is that you've been working in the research center in the think tank, and how could we influence you? Because as far as I know, the member states, the MEPs, they asked you for this kind of report. And how could we maybe influence you to write some of the outputs or recommendations that we already, you know, wrote in our papers? I don't know if you could explain us a bit more of that.
Yeah, well, the EPRS, it does two main things, and one part is very visible, which is the publications, which are online. So you Google EP Think Tank, you will find them. But also EPRS does a lot of individual work for the members. So any individual can come and say, you know, I'm giving a talk next week about sustainable energy in the Mediterranean. I need some facts and figures. So that's less visible. It's a confidential service that we do for the members. Mainly, you know, we outsource a little bit of work and we do a little bit of primary research, but mainly what we deliver to the members is from already available sources. So we're not going out and doing our own, I don't know, surveys, modeling, etc. We are really depending on what we can find from good, reliable sources. And I go back maybe a bit to the to some of these umbrella bodies or the representative bodies. I mean, if in my team someone was sitting down to write a note about Interreg or something, they would be looking at what Interact has produced. They'd be looking at CPMR. They'd be looking at the Committee of the Regions. So they mightn't necessarily have enough space and time to say, there's a great report here from you know, from Marseille or from Genoa, but they would kind of go at the European level. The representative bodies think this, this, and this. So, I mean, we do, I think, rely quite heavily on what we get from contacts. Of course, if we get a specific request focusing on one region or city, we'll often also reach out to the representative office in Brussels. So, you know, if we have a request for Galicia, we'll reach out to the guys in the Galician office. So it's mainly at that level, because for reasons of just time and resources, we don't have probably much more capacity to go down to the very, very local level. What I would also say is that EPRS has a new unit, which is called linking the levels, which is precisely trying to do this task of bringing together different levels at the sort of regional or subnational level up to the European level. I don't know yet how big of a presence that they have online, but I know that they have a monthly newsletter and that they are quite happy to receive contributions from regional bodies such as yourselves. So I can put you, Mercedes, maybe in contact with some colleagues there, and they can send you out what they have, and they are a good channel of entry, I would say.
Thank you very much, Sara. Okay, Paolo, now we go to Mentimeter. Are we?
Yes, I'm very
Okay.
sorry because I was completely frozen last time and I couldn't do anything. I just had to switch computers in order to connect again. I'm so sorry for this. I was just before going to the Mentimeter. I can see there are two questions to Sara. I don't know if you wish to address them now, or would you go to Mentimeter actually now and afterwards Sara would reply. I don't know.
Maybe go to Mentimeter and give me time to look at the questions.
Okay, right. Okay, so let's go then. So we have a question for you, which is just launching. So this was the first question.
And remember to share.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this was the result of the previous question. So now this is the second question, which is, which of the following have you approached lately? Is it a member of the, so you have to go to menti.com and then the 18, 59, 36. So you can see already two replies. Let's give it some time for participants to reply. So
Paolo, do you need to share the screen or not?
yes, just 1 minute. So as you can see, it's more, the majority has approached the regional, national or local authority. So only 10% reached for a member of the EU Parliament. Perhaps they don't know them enough. But we have 39 participants that have 40 up to now that have replied, 41. So, but the big majority is really the regional and national level. So now I'll stop sharing and go back to give back the floor to Mercedes.
Thank you. So now I will start sharing. There we go. We are now going to introduce. Let's see. Oops. No, there we go. To introduce Andrea Rodriguez. As I said before, she's an expert in communication and public relations. She has a lot of experience in international organizations. And maybe you would like to react, Andrea, to some of Sara's presentation. And I know that you were quite acquainted also with the Committee of Regions, so maybe you also could give us a hint on what's the role of the Committee of the Regions, and especially for regional kind of projects as we are.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. Obviously, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you to Paolo and Laura for inviting me to this session. And I have been asked for this session to talk about my experience. I mean, I'm not a lobbyist. I was working with an international organization, ensuring the liaison with the European Union institutions. So my experience is more related to that. And I have to say it's maybe quite different from your experience because you are a project, and it's true that when you are working for an institution in charge of interinstitutional affairs, it's easier to approach maybe MEPs or political representative of the EU institution. But I hope that I will share with you things which will be useful for you. And as Sara said, maybe it will be a little bit basics, but basics are good also to keep in mind when making a little bit of advocacy. The first thing I would like to share with you, I have been asked to prepare a very brief slide. I'm not very fond of PowerPoint, so a very brief slide about the Committee of the Region. So I will try to share my screen without making exploding the computer. Okay, so if I do that, just one slide. Okay. So you see my screen? Yeah, I suppose. Okay.
Yes,
So,
yes.
just thank you. So just in order to remind what is the Committee of the Region? Well, this is a very small institution located in Brussels. It's one of the European Union institution, and indeed it's an advisory body of the European Union. So they are not producing legislation. Basically, they are consulted and they are advising on the proposed legislation. One of their main role, which has been reinforced with the Treaty of Lisbon, is to monitor the subsidiarity which was one of the three principles of the European Union. It is composed by 329 members who are local representative, regional representative, so they are locally elected in their own country, and they have also 329 alternates. They are representing all the European Union, so the 27 member states right now. And they produce, as Sara mentioned before during her presentation, opinions on proposed legislation. So they have to produce opinions mandatory on youth, education, vocational training, culture, public health, EU transport, energy networks, telecommunication, social and economic cohesion, which I think that maybe social and economic cohesion is what you are more focusing on as an Interreg project. They can also be consulted by the institution who are proposing the legislation about the legislation, and they can make also their own opinion on their own initiative. Also, if there is a problem, I would say respecting the subsidiarity principle, they can ask for an ex post judicial review. The Committee of the Region is organized by national delegations. So you have a national delegation per country, 27 right now. And indeed, how they are elected, how do you become a member of the Committee of the Region? Indeed, is the national delegation which propose the members of this own country as members of the Committee of the Region. So that's why you don't have, or you can have, for instance, a major, you can have a president of a region. In Spain, for instance, you have the president of Galicia, but you have also the major of Vigo, for instance. The Committee of the Region, you don't have to forget that it's a political body. So it is composed by political members, political representatives, and they are organized by political groups. You have 6 political groups right now, which are the main groups: EPP, Socialist, Renew Europe, European Alliance, and ECR. And more recently, you have the Greens. Before they were not represented, but now they are represented in the Committee of the Regions. And the Committee of the Regions organize its work also through commissions, which is a little bit like the committees of the European Parliament. You have thematic commissions, and so the members are authoring a commission and they are working on the opinion through this commission. You have several of interest. For instance, you have the COTER, which is the one on cohesion policy, which is the one which we are more familiarized within Interreg. You have more information about the Committee of the Region. I'm not working for the Committee of the Region, so I will not go deeper on that, but you have more information on the website. But why it is important, and I will stop sharing the screen. I am not able, okay, sorry. Okay, so why it is important to have the Committee of the Region in your case in mind? Well, basically, as we saw before in the Menti, you are more in contact with regional and national political representative. And the Committee of the Region at the end are political representative from your region. So they know your reality on the region and they have a specific interest on the cohesion policy, as I said before. They are very approachable, and one way to approach this member of the Committee of the Region is, first, you can go to the website of the Committee of the Region and look for the and just I think that someone is not mute, but you can go to the website and look for their email address and write directly, or you can go also through the political groups of the Committee of the Region and ask an administrator of the political group, because they are kind of assistant of their members of the Committee of the Region about how to approach the member. Or also you can go to the secretariat of the several commission of your interest and ask for help. I mean, they are working directly with them, so they are in close contact with them, and it's easier for them to have this contact than for you, that probably you will send an email and maybe it will not be read, or it will be read with a lot of delay. So just go for it. Another thing that can be of your interest when lobbying for your issues at AU level, it's if you want to approach national representative, you don't have to lose the idea that you have a permanent representation of your own country in Brussels. So for instance, you have, I know better, the permanent representation of Spain, where you have consular on different subjects. And they are very interested indeed in knowing much more about Interreg, about the things that are made in their own country. And at the end, these people are representing the permanent representation during the Council of the European Union. So they are someone who are working for the ministers of your own country, and they can really help you and provide you some good advice. And they meet people indeed. And you have also, as I think that Sara mentioned before, all these groups of interest, like I saw before among the participants of this session that Claudia from CPRM is here. So you have this kind of association or organization, group of interest with regional interest, who are composed also with political members, political representative. And so maybe it's a good way, if you are working on the same issue, to have a chat with them, just to have a phone call, to email them, and to share what are your issues and your idea. Don't forget also that in Brussels, you have a high representation of regional interest through the regional offices. So for instance, if you are based, I don't know, in my case, I'm here in Cantabria, go to the office, meet them, and try to make your own advocacy work. Another point which is very important to keep in mind is, as Sara said, I'm repeating a little bit what Sara said, sorry for that, but I think it's important to insist, is to make your research on the political representative you want to approach. But the first question you have to keep in mind is, why are you approaching this person? I mean, why this person and not another one? Sometimes we have in mind that there is a political representative working on an issue, and it makes sense to go to this political representative, but the access to this person is quite complicated. So it's important for you to understand the map of influence and all the games of soft power and strong power when you are advocating for your interests. So maybe don't go for the MEP who is the rapporteur on an issue, but go to someone from his political group who is close to this MEP in order to have access, or go to an assistant of another political member. So just have a very clear map on in your mind about who are working on what and what are their circles, and try to go through different doors and different paths, because sometimes the most straight path is the most complicated, unfortunately. And have always clear objectives in mind. What do you want to ask? What do you want to achieve? I mean, do you want just to provide information, okay, see, if you just want to provide information about your project, to promote your project, just send an email. I mean, you are not requiring something concrete. What the political representative want to know is what you really want from them. And something at the end is a game of diplomacy. It's a win-win game. So at the end, you have to win something, they have to win something, to make it clearer. Also something very interesting and important when you are trying to advocate for your own interest is to keep in mind that political representatives at their name designed are linked to political groups and they have political colors. So I know that from my experience at Interreg that it can be controversial to be linked to a political group, and sometimes it's difficult to approach because you don't want to be linked to this political color or to have a political issue. But so you have to keep in mind this idea that, and I think that we will see that later about the shadow rapporteurs, because shadow rapporteurs are a good way to influence also the EU legislation, but at the end they are linked to political groups. So I mean, it's something we have to keep in mind. And for instance, you have to understand that sometimes an MEP and or a political representative behave on behalf of his or her political group. In my case, I had an experience, one of my first experience when advocating for interest of an organization for which I was working was to ask for the financing of pilot projects within the by the European Parliament. The European Parliament finances pilot project, which then became preparatory action and then can become a EU funding line. I committed a mistake. You always learn with your mistake, which was to approach an MEP and just to approach this MEP and not to consider the MEP within her political group. In this case, it was a woman. And the fact is that when they proposed the pilot project, they didn't propose our pilot project. And they explained to me that they had to propose a pilot project on behalf of all the political groups. So they have decided on among them which pilot project they would like to present. And obviously, if you had more MEPs from the same political group, I would say supporting the project, you will have more chance to be proposed as a pilot project. So I didn't get that, but I learned this, that at the end you have to consider the MEP or the political representative within his or her political group, and also within obviously his or her interest or commission or committee, sorry, regarding the parliament, or commission regarding the committee of the regions. I mean, they are working on specific issues, and sometimes, as Sara mentioned before, they have specific interest in something. I had a very good experience, for instance, at the parliament with an MEP who was not working directly on the issue I was working on, but he was really, really fond of it because of his own experience in his country. So he really helped me to open doors. So he put me in contact with other MEPs and with the committees, some people important in the committees of the issue on which I was working. So just keep in mind that you can be helped also by people who are not directly related to the thing you are working on. About the intergroups, I think that it's something quite interesting because at the end they're informal and they are organized through the interest also, thanks to the interest of some MEPs. You can have a good way also if you are working on an issue specific to this intergroup to have a kind of hearing with them or to share information with them, and to have maybe then the opportunity to be in a more important meeting like a hearing if it works well. Don't forget also when you're working with political representatives that they are coming from a region or from a country. I mean, I know that MEPs are working for all the European Union, but at the end, they are working also for their region in a way, I would say. So they are from their own region, and it helps you as you are all located in specific regions and covering specific areas. It will help you to connect with this person, with the assistant or with the MEP in say. I have been in contact, for instance, with MEPs from my region because because of previous experience, and they were not related to the work I was dealing with, but they were very friendly because this was, at the end, it's about human relations. There was a connection because we were coming from the same place, and they had a specific interest in knowing people from their place. At the end, it's also a kind of campaign for them. When approaching political representative, and I will finish because I promised just 10 minutes of intervention to Mercedes, just keep in mind that you have to be straight to the point. You have to go straight to the point, to be short. I mean, short is not bad, and it looks a little bit weird to say you have to keep it short because maybe you have something very complex to explain. But the fact is that you have to keep in mind that political representatives are very busy. I know that you are also very busy, and probably maybe more, I don't know. But the fact is that they are very busy, and plus they are dealing with a lot of people because they receive a lot of emails, they receive a lot of phone calls. So the idea is to keep their attention, to catch them in the fastest way, I would say, you know, like in a very short time, to make that what you are saying, it's attractive, and avoid all your jargon or your complex terminology and so on, because they are not specialists in what you are dealing with, probably. I mean, they can have an interest, they can work on a political file, but at the end, they are working on different political files, and nobody can be specialist in heritage, maritime issues, fisheries, and I don't know, whatever. So just make it simple. I would say explain what you are doing, like for dummies, to make it simpler for you to understand. And provide, as I saw the Menti before, like what we should do, emotions or science things. Well, provide facts, concrete facts of their interest, something that, for instance, numbers attract interest of political representative. When we are talking about funding, about how much is located and so on, it's important for them to know, to have these kind of figures. So don't avoid the figures, but make it like more human, more, and I mean, easy to understand for them and attractive. Always keep an eye on what's going on at the several bodies of the EU institution, but also at national and regional level. I mean, in your own region, probably they are adopting several I would say decrees or whatever, and it's important to maybe to ask your councillor within your region or your representative for meetings in order to defend your position. I mean, they are always meeting with a lot of people with group of interest, for instance, the majors or the representative of regional government bodies and so on. So just keep in mind what they are doing and why what you are doing is important for them or can help them. And by the way, they are consulting all these political representatives. I mean, we saw at the parliament, the rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs, when they are making their work on a proposed legislation, they consult external people. The commission also consult external people. So it's important to approach, don't be shy and take your phone, send an email, ask for a meeting to present your project or what you are doing and why it is important, why you will influence the policy, or if they are not taking into account some facts which could be important for the policy. And lastly, and I'm finishing on time, don't forget the communication. Political representatives are very active on social media also because it's a way for them to be visible. So when you are meeting with someone and you can have a good picture and you can identify them on Twitter or whatever, or if you are working on something and you take their words and so on, so identify them also on Twitter. Just try also to enter through social media to this political dimension and make the most of these tools at the end, where everybody is active. Plus, I think that Twitter, in the case of the European Union bubble, as we say, it's the most effective or efficient channel right now concerning social media. I would not go for Facebook or LinkedIn, for instance, for political matters. And with that, I hope I have been short and clear.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Very effective as usual. I had some questions but I don't want to get the time for colleagues and the time also for Mentimeter. And I guess that, Paulo, are you ready for another Mentimeter? Yes?
Yes, I am. I can launch a new one. Yes, of course.
Okay. And after this Mentimeter, then we will have a debate, the debate with the audience, with the participants, where we won't only ask questions, but also sharing experience. And I heard that CPMR is here, so they could share some of their experiences, for example, but not only. There are many projects that they are doing already their work. We saw it in the first survey. They got to a hearing. So we are also really looking forward to hear what you're doing and asking questions. We know there's already some for Sara and probably for Andrea. So Paulo, now the floor is yours.
Okay, so please go again to menti.com and the code is 185936. So I'm about to launch the next question. So once you approach a decision maker, you have to consider his/her nationality, native language, political party, the defended causes, and the hobbies. So here we already have quite a lot of answers from 23 people. And I'm just now going to show the live results.
Remember to share your screen.
Yes, I'm going to show. Can you see it now? Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So participants in general think that you should of course they are inspired by what we've heard from Sara and Andrea, and it's the causes that are the main the main thing to consider when approaching a decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 57 replies.
Mm-hmm.
There's just one for hobbies.
Well, maybe it's also good to know what's his hobby or her hobby, right? So maybe you could approach them for that reason. I mean, I really think that also the political party, as Andrea mentioned, or the nationality and the region, I think we have to play with all these circumstances, but of course the defended causes is the most important one. Mm-hmm.
So I'll stop sharing and go back to the questions.
And let's go back to the questions. Maybe Laura, would you deal then with the questions? How many questions are we having in the chat?
Yeah, we have 2 questions and 1 comment. Mm-hmm. So we have 1 question from Alessandro. I think the question was for Sara. So how to get the attention of such lobbying organizations in Brussels, like CPMR, and convince them to support you? I don't know if Sara wants to answer.
Well, if we have someone from CPMR here, I would definitely be happy if they would want to come in on this. Look, I think like anything, like Euro cities, like the regional offices, they're transparent in the sense that you can look on their website, you can find out who deals with what. You reach out individually to them and you try to see where and how you can sort of build these coalitions. I think that's what's interesting for these central bodies in Brussels. It's a question not just of coming with your individual issue, but framing it in terms of the bigger policy issues. And the other thing that I would say about a lot of these offices is they have excellent relationships with members, so they are another way into the European Parliament.
Okay. And then
excuse me, just to say that there is a Manuel Maniscalco from CPMR is on the list.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me clear.
We can hear you very well. Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, yeah, it was a bit funny, and actually we were discussing with our other colleagues that are connected as well from the CPMR. Thank you, Alessandro, for asking this question. Well, I would say that the first thing you could do is to get directly in touch with us, because of course, I'm going to try to be clear and concise in the answer. I suppose that depending on the type of organization you represent, you can directly contact us, of course, where we're mainly in touch with regions, since we're a network of regions, as you know. So perhaps the best way for them to reach out to us is, directly try to catch our attention. And when it comes to, for instance, trying to get the results of your project being used for advocacy lobbying purposes, there are several means, and if you are targeting us directly, it's true that we have an influence in Brussels, as it was mentioned. And for instance, we are holding the secretariat of the CRICA Intergroup, which is a very powerful tool. It's something that we use quite often, especially for, we use the CRICA Intergroup, for instance, when we organize projects final conferences. And this, for instance, I know that we do it for the projects in which we're involved, but it also happened that we did it for projects with which we did not have anything to do, meaning projects in which we were not involved. So you can always contact either us or directly the CRICA Intergroup Secretariat, if of course the theme on which you are working is relevant to the intergroup, because it's the Sea, Rivers, Islands and Coastal Areas Intergroup. So I think that's, for instance, European Parliament intergroups are powerful tools. And then, sorry if I'm a bit unclear in the answer, but if you want to get the attention of such lobbying organizations, well, you need to have, I think, a very clear objective in mind, and try to target perhaps one of the actions that are carrying out. For instance, in our case, you would need to find, well, you could, for instance, ask us to become associated partner or observer in specific project, or invite us to a meeting to show what you're doing and why you think this could be relevant for us, and why you think this could be interesting for our members, because you have to think also for such an organization that what we do is to serve our members first and foremost. I don't know if my answer was clear. Perhaps I've probably not covered all the aspects of the question. Well, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have. Well, Alessandro or other people, of course, you can write us an email and we can have a bilateral conversation, of course.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And to take off a bit of a pressure to CPMR, oh, sorry, my cat's coming once in a while. To take off the pressure to CPMR, there are other multipliers like Nestor for tourism, or MedCities, or Eurocities, for example, or Fedarene for energy. So, I mean, there are other multipliers, other ONGs, or WWF, which we will have later on also in our debate. So I don't know, is there any more questions?
Yes, there are more. There is one more question from Lydia. So she says, do you think the approach to the MEPs as individual projects can be effective? Isn't it better to approach them through lobbyist associations, groups, experts, in line with our objectives? So I think the question was for Sara as well, but if Andrea or anyone else wants to answer.
Well, look, I think it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It could actually be both, and it depends upon, again, the issue, the cause, or what you are trying to achieve. I think that, yeah, for some more low-profile local events, it's good to have the local MEP involved, and that person brings something that possibly an organization can't bring. But indeed, if you are trying to, let's say, lobby on some specific issue or another, you have to broaden the coalition, and then it's better to go as broad as possible. It also depends upon you and your network. If you have a good connection to a member or to a local mayor or to somebody somewhere, you exploit that. So you have to put a package together, a portfolio of what you want to do according to the resources and the tools you have at your disposal.
I think also one important issue is that we need to combine perfectly the timing of a project and the timing that we are having a result and the timing of a legislation. And this is one of the main problems, because when we submit a proposal, when there's a project, there's a timeline for an outcome, and that normally will be at the end of the project, and probably they are taking decisions on that topic before. So from the very beginning, I would also suggest maybe to have a double calendar, in the sense that a calendar from the project and also a calendar on what's going on in the EU, so you're on time, because it would be a pity to have these recommendations, these outputs, and they're just in the box because they arrived a bit late or they didn't arrive on time. My experience on lobbying was on energy efficiency in buildings with the CPMR and Catalonia region, and it started 4 years before than really when the directive came, and then they took over again. So it really took a lot of time. And another thing, we need to be very patient, right? I think on this.
Yeah, if I may, the problem, maybe from my experience of Interreg, is that most part of the project, for instance, the one linked to risk management or whatever environment, they can have results when the project is finished, like 2 or 3 years later. So at the end, it's not depending on the execution of the project, unfortunately, but it's really depend on the evolution of the nature and the environment. So it will really depend also on the capacity of the agency or the body which is working on this project to capitalize, to make lobby after, once the project will come to an end. So you have to think about it when you are making your capitalization and promotion strategy of the project, I suppose, and take into account that probably your advocacy work will not take place in the 2 first years of your project.
Mm-hmm. I can see there are some more questions and remarks. Laura?
Yes, indeed, there are more comments. So there is one comment from Carmen Dali, our NCP from Malta. So she said that in Malta, they always encourage partners to invite the ministers for the launch or closing events of the project, notably those in the field of expertise of the project. And the minister in charge of EU funding for support, sustainability, and visibility for of the project. So why do they do that? It's because media always cover the event when a minister is invited. So this actually makes the project more visible to the general public than if a minister is present, because the media will be there. So to them, it's a great opportunity to make the project more visible, and also to raise awareness about the project to the minister. And then we had one comment from Josep, who's in charge, responsible for the sustainable tourism community of our program, and he said that from his side they address European authorities, but for most of their projects they think that national and regional authorities are more relevant, actually, because they have more competences, knowledge on tourism policy. So they also think that it's important to them, their projects, to approach managing authorities of ESIF funds and operational programs that also lie at the national and regional level. So he said that, of course, the tips were useful, but really national and regional level authorities are the ones to target.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's it.
I think also there was a comment, sorry, about from Ryan saying that Erin is another
yes,
multiplier.
yes.
So we got it. We know you, but it's true that I didn't mention. But well, I was just mentioning some examples. And also, it's funny to see how complicated could be to reach our national and regional politicians, isn't it? I mean, sometimes it's easier the European, as we said. An opinion, yeah.
I'm sorry, Mercedes. Could I intervene?
Yeah.
I'm Giuseppe Rodriguez.
Giuseppe, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to remark this question of the transparency and the lobbying culture, because I think it's not the same at European or at national regional level. I believe that maybe that those authorities are closer to us. They haven't established these information transparency systems that the European institutions have set up. So in some sense, it's more difficult to arrive to the national and regional authorities that to arrive to the European institutions. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Would you like to make any comment related to that, Sara, or Andrea had to leave? I don't even, Andrea's here. No, it's just a statement. Okay. Mercè, she has an opinion, and I think this is the reason also Med program wanted to organize this meeting. And in our case, in Interact, we did also, because it's in time now for the next programming period, now that we're preparing the next programming period, to think on how to approach this lobbying. If we want to really reach the decision makers, we really need to consider and have this strategy beforehand. And that's what Mercè, she was talking about this, to consider everything in an earlier stage. Thank you, Mercè. Is there any other question? Maybe you would like to raise your hand to feel more comfortable. No? Anyone would like to share their experience? Maybe any of the networks, the multipliers, to tell us what's their job there in Brussels and how they are associated partners or partners of an Interact program, and they do this multiplying job in Brussels. Ryan, are you from Erin? Maybe it's the time for you to speak.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if anybody else would jump in first.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
My
name is Ryan.
Very polite of you.
Ryan Titley from ERIN. ERIN is the European Regions Research and Innovation Network. We're a Brussels-based network, similar to some of the others mentioned. We represent 120 regions from across Europe. We have 13 thematic working groups, one of which takes care of policy. So the work we're doing in the Interreg Green Growth Project is particularly around capitalization and mainstreaming. I would say that a lot of the information that's come out this morning has been really interesting. I like the fact that colleagues are referencing the Brussels offices as well. This is how we capitalize a lot on the experiences in these projects, and we work through our Brussels offices. I'm not actually the colleague that's leading on the Green Growth Project, so I can't give too many examples directly from there, but the work that we're doing in ERIN is to interact with the stakeholder organizations and the institutions that have previously been mentioned. And we do that on the ground in Brussels with the Brussels offices. So again, I would say, please get in touch with your Brussels offices if you're looking for this, for the information to be taken up. And then they can feed it through ERIN, and that goes through our individual working groups or directly into our policy working group. And we can find ways for recommendations to be put forward. Of course, during the Horizon Europe process, as we started to put position papers together, we were trying to take into consideration all the recommendations from the different projects that we're working with, but also the projects that our members are working with, and try to use this as a bottom-up approach to build our foundations and recommendations for any future programming period. And that's going to be the same for the Interreg program as well. So now is the time, I think, to start interacting with your Brussels offices and take it to, for example, ERIN's working groups, and you mentioned Next Tour as well. I'm sure it's the same for them.
Thank you very much. And can you tell us about this alliance? I mean, the fact that sometimes, you know, but that's something that Sara mentioned before, and sometimes we need to leave aside one of the objectives and to focus on one and find some allies in order to be more trying to push or to influence on a specific topic or a specific theme.
Yeah, I think this is really important. I mean, a lot of the work that we're doing is around consensus building as well. So to try to find not just those regions that share similar interests to you and have similar points that they need to be picked up, but also other organizations. And as Erin, we've worked quite closely with, for example, Eurocities, the Vanguard Initiative, to put together joint position papers. So it's not just that you're representing, in our case, 120 regions, but also joining up with other networks to try to amplify the message that we're putting across. So it works on a local level where you try to bring together more communities, a regional level where we're bringing together more regions, but then also at a European level when we have more influence if we can come together and share the same opinions. So again, yeah, it's all about consensus building and try to build up that message.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you. Laura, I think there are also some comments in the chat.
Yes, there is one comment from Carla from the IUCN. She says that she wonders if lobbying should be considered also in previous stage, targeting political parties. MEPs normally will follow political guidelines and approaches of the parties they represent. Any opinion?
Sara, I don't know if you want to say something because
yeah, I mean, I guess the point is that in some cases MEPs follow the party line, but in other cases they shape the party line. So you're trying to get them to shape the line, aren't you? That's.
Yeah, in my case, I think that, well, maybe it's when we said before, Mercedes, you said you have to think about the cycle of your project, and it's true. The problem of the project is just if you want to base your argumentation, your speech on figures and your results are coming at the end of the project, it can be difficult, but obviously the lobby can be made at earlier stage with your ideas already to influence what is going on. Then you will provide the figures maybe later on based on the results of your pilot project and so on. But I think that, yes, definitely what suggests Carla, it's good. Make your contacts, know who is involved in what you are working on, and try to already sell the ideas, your arguments from an early stage.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, any more questions maybe, or I also would like to highlight the importance of doing a mapping whenever, and I think that after this event, I mean, I always been very, I had the idea that when we establish a project, we had to establish not only the communication and capitalization strategy, but in a way also through maybe this capitalization strategy, this lobbying action, right? Because we want that whatever outputs we are doing can reach European level and also national and regional. And I think after this event, MED is mature enough to start thinking of all this ahead. And I really, it's not easy, but I think that we should consider time and resources to do it. And that's, and maybe being aware that we do outputs and maybe some in the cross-border kind of problems, infrastructures, not the case of the MED analysis, but we have to really always be thinking on what's going on the European institutions and also on our national level, what kind of policies are going to be developed. We have to be much more linked to our territorial decision makers.
Mercedes, just one thing, I don't know if I can share a secret.
Of course, we are only 100 and something, 117. So come on, share it with me.
No, we are at the point of drafting the communication strategy for 21-27. And we are including on that also the capitalization strategy for the future program. So I've been taking notes of things that we could do in the future that would push forward this approach of more advocacy regarding our projects. And so I would like to tell to the partners here participating in this seminar that we are now doing that, and we took a lot in consideration the evaluations and the focus groups that happened in the evaluation of the program of the current period.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Thank
it
you.
was just it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. I would also think that most of the partners here, they're horizontal projects probably, and some strategic projects, last call kind of projects. Putting into your partnership a multiplier as the one we just mentioned, no? or as an associated partner, I think it's key in this case, because they really, I mean, having the possibility of building a partnership and a multidisciplinary kind of partnership where there are very technical kind of people, there are communication kind of people in their different regions, but also this kind of people that could advocate for the cause in Brussels. It's very important. So I think that put in your life and a multiplier, and I think you could have a better result probably in Brussels, and you won't have that stress of saying, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. This is another world. No, there are people that are really experts, and you don't need to get an agency, of course, because there are some, I mean, an agency expert in lobbying, but there are other kind of institutions that they make that job very, very well. Any other kind of questions? Maybe we can, any Mentimeter from your side? Is
not for the moment. There's only the coffee break, right?
Okay, so I think it's time to share my screen and to share that. Okay, coffee time. So maybe we can have not 5 minutes, but 10 minutes of a coffee break, or comfort break, as we say now.
I would just like to thank to give a word of thanks to Andrea and Sara for taking their time to share their experiences. I know they are leaving now, and a very, very big thanks for sharing the content you have shared, which are extremely useful for the partners.
Thanks to all of you. And just as I'm leaving right now, just if you have any specific question or whatever, you can join me through LinkedIn. I will share it with Paolo because I'm changing my work. So just I will share my LinkedIn contact, and you can add me, and we can have a more deeper chat if you would like. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Andrea. Thank you very much. And
yeah,
Sara?
thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you all the best for your next projects. And yeah, again, you can find me on social media, and Paolo has my details, so do feel free to get in touch. Okay, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.